These computers give us instant access to the state of the world. Troop movements, Soviet missile tests, shifting weather patterns. It all flows into this room and then into what we call the Whopper computer.
Whopper, what is that?
It's a War Operation Plan Response. This is Mr. Richter. Paul, would you like to tell these gentlemen about the Whopper?
Okay, Rick, let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, a.k.a. TV's Travis. This is episode number 252, and our movie this week is 1983's Wargames. And here to talk with me about it, she had not seen it before, it's Kitlondon. Kit, how you doing?
I'm fabulous. How are you?
I am doing all right. So, okay, tell me, what is your history at all with Wargames prior to watching it for this show?
It was always on regular TV, like TNT or something, and I didn't want to watch it with commercials, but it was one of those movies my dad really liked.
Okay.
And all I knew was, I didn't know how that came about. I actually had it kind of wrong, but I knew that the way to win was not to play.
Okay.
That's the only thing I knew.
All right. So I had seen this movie before, but it was a long time ago, and I haven't watched it since. So there was a few things I just completely forgot about while I was watching it this time, which was kind of fun for me. But this movie is kind of one of those classic 80s, and when you think about, or when people discuss movies where hacking is involved, this is usually brought up in that list of like good hacking movies, or at least decent. Look, hacking and computer stuff, cyberspace, any of that kind of thing never gets done perfectly in a movie because, let's face it, just watching a bunch of people sitting in a basement poking at a keyboard is not going to be very entertaining to watch. So you tend to get very stylized views of that. Some of them work better than others.
And it was new at the time too, I think too. Like this was like a foreign concept.
Oh yeah. In fact, this movie is partially responsible for, because technically hacking into or logging onto the computer that David does in this movie is not technically illegal. At the time that this came out, that wasn't a crime yet. There were other things he did that were, and obviously the military doesn't want you doing that. But like, they made, and I forget what the law was called. It was in the trivia. Somebody it got mentioned somewhere. But there was a law that came out of it that was referenced. This movie was referenced as part of why we need that law, because if you think about it, prior to something like this, most computer systems, people didn't have computers in their homes prior, not nowhere near, obviously nowhere near what we have now, but even nowhere near what they came to in the late 80s into the 90s. Home computers weren't really a thing. And so most people thought, no, nobody's going to log into a computer system that isn't an authorized user because they just don't have the equipment for it. So it just wasn't thought of. But this movie kind of helped with that. And what I like is that it very much looks at the computers mostly fairly realistically in terms of kind of how they were working at the time. Obviously, there's an artificial intelligence aspect to it that's a little bit beyond what they may have had capabilities for in 1983 and even today. But, it's a movie, so you're going to play a little fast, and there's going to be a little hand-waving.
Right.
But what did you think as seeing it now, I guess, 40 years after it came out? What did you think of it just as a movie? Did you have a good time watching it?
Oh, yeah. I loved it. It was great. And I can also see, like, the technology's old, but we're still having that conversation, though, that the main computer guy and the general was having about the AI versus human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, we're still having those conversations. Like, they look different. The technology's different, but that conversation's still the same. Regardless, it's not about nuclear, but it's
Yeah.
are the computers taking humans' jobs, and can the computer do it better, than a human? But a human has those tendencies where you can stop things. Like I found that very fascinating.
Yeah, and what I like, so the writers of this actually went on to write Sneakers a few years later, and I don't know if you've ever seen that, but that's got some hacking stuff in it as well. That's really good, and they did a lot of research. They learned a lot of stuff. It's not 100% accurate, but it's more accurate probably than not, and it kind of like my favorite hacking movie is Hackers. And that movie gets some flack from some people who want to rail that, oh, it's not realistic. Well, no, it's not. And they didn't try to make it realistic.
It's Hollywood.
They made it interesting to watch, but they also, that movie, a lot of what it got right was that it got the culture of the hackers and kind of what they were doing right. Because especially in that 90s, it was a lot of that free information, everything should be open type of conversation. It was very, very much digital hippies in a lot of ways, where cyberspace. It didn't matter where you came from or who you were in the real world. Who you were in the computer was something different, and that's what I think this movie got right. Was like David is just a high school kid. He's a smart kid. He's really into computers, but he's just a kid, and all he wanted to do was play some games. He wanted to grab some game programs from a company and play them, and he accidentally nearly starts World War III because of it.
Right. Oh, but he didn't just want to play games. He did want to do that, but he also wanted to press the girl.
Yeah, which that was a thing that I'd forgotten. Like I knew, he was trying to impress Ali Sheedy, and then what I'd forgotten was they have the whole scene in the beginning where he's hacking into the different computers. And he books the flight to, or the reservation for their flight to Paris for 2 and all that. And then later in the movie, that comes back to bite him because that's part of why the military doesn't believe him. Like, I loved that. I thought that was a really smartly written thing because it's easy to just make that a throwaway and never mention it again. But to bring that back, it's like, oh, no, they are paying attention. They do, like... Because you know how it is. In movies, you have military or police are one of two things. They're either overbearing and draconian, or they're completely useless. And in this case, they weren't really either of those. Like, the military wasn't terrible in this. They just didn't know, like, it was a new era, and they were trying to figure out how to fit into that, while also being in the midst of the Cold War, like all that kind of stuff going on. But they also weren't like, Dabney Coleman's character didn't believe David at first. And the military people weren't on David's side. He had to, sneak his way out of NORAD and all of that. But he also he hacked into their computer, their $1 billion computer, however much it was, a thing that they thought shouldn't have been able to happen. So they're going to respond accordingly because, again, he almost launched nukes. It's fairly important.
Right.
So.
And that was in my notes. That's the one thing, though, the military had, and Dabney Coleman's character was ego, that they don't believe him because I am the smart scientist. There's no way this high schooler is smart enough or smarter than me to get into my system.
Yeah.
That tends to carry over in I find that to be kind of a trope that the military and the scientists, they all have, is that ego that this can't happen, especially by a high schooler. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And not only that,
I
but
found that consistent.
Yeah. And I think this movie may have created that trope. The trope of like the really gifted high school type kid who can break into the system, but then nobody believes him when he's like, no, I didn't do what you think. Like, I mean, that trope got used in Hackers, the movie, with Joey. Joey breaks into a bank, but he didn't do all the other stuff. It was somebody else. So I think this movie may have started that. I'm not positive, but I just liked how the military people, Dabney Coleman and the general, were never the antagonists. They weren't like they were the antagonists, but they weren't the bad guys. They were trying to figure out what the hell happened and just trying to like save face and stop nukes from happening. But they were never like
they
evil.
were antagonizing each other, though.
Yeah, that's true.
They were definitely on two different sides of the playing field, you know,
Yes.
and then they had to come together where, hey, this is your system. The general's like, hey, this is your stuff. Why is it going wrong? What's going on? You know, and yeah, they were definitely against each other. They were fighting more against each other than they were with David.
Yeah. Yeah, David just kind of got caught in the middle of all of it.
Yeah.
So I had a few things while I was watching. So one of the things I completely forgot, that opening scene. First of all, the opening scene with the two guys showing up to, you know, switch out shifts is great. But I had completely 100% forgotten that John Spencer and Michael Madsen were those two guys, like a very young Michael Madsen. Yep. I actually didn't recognize him at first. It was a minute or two into that scene, and I kept looking at him and I kept squinting. I'm like, is that Michael? I wasn't sure. And sure enough, it was. There was a lot of character actors in this I recognized from other stuff.
Yeah. Art LaFleur.
Yes.
The voice. I was like, I know that voice. Why do I know that voice? I'm like, and so, you know, I did my Googling afterwards, and yeah, it's a babe from The Sandlot.
Yep.
Heroes get remembered, but legends never die.
That's right.
Like, that's classic line there.
And
that's why I know his voice.
Yep. I loved seeing him. Again, Spencer and Madsen, and then on top of that, I love the fact that they're coming in, they're changing shifts, and they're sitting here just talking about the weed. He's talking about this woman that grows weed and how great it is, and they're just going on and on. And then
is that
suddenly,
what they're talking about? I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I have a bit of audio capture from that. I'll play it later. But yeah, he's talking about that, and then, you know, all of a sudden, ooh, we've got a missile detection launch order thing going on. So it's like,
oh, before we get there, I love the urinating sign that anybody's caught urinating here is going to be discharged.
That was great. Oh, whoever,
like,
I don't.
Why would you be peeing in the hallway? But okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping that was just like somebody having a fun joke. They're going to address the set. Too. But I did like that. And I loved, so they're doing all that, and then I forgot how tense that scene was too. Like it's that whole opening scene. By the end of it, that's rough.
Oh yeah. I felt it. I was like, and then they cut off, and I'm like, oh my god, did he turn the key? I thought it was real.
Yeah, and then we're like, and like, my note.
Something happened. Did he turn the key? Did he shoot him?
Right. And my note was, and we never hear from about those two ever again, which we end up seeing them later when they're swapping out, putting the electronics
and I was happy.
in.
I was like, oh, okay, he's still alive. Like, okay.
Okay, good. His partner didn't shoot him. Good.
Yeah, my first thing was, why do we need guns down there? But okay, sure.
I mean, it's the military. You know, they got to take guns everywhere, it seems.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also, I did think, and tell me what you think about this, because it does feel consistent with the era that this movie was made. But after that tense opening scene like that, and we've got I mean, you know, they're just covered in flop sweat. They're pulling guns on each other, all this kind of stuff. And then the music that plays for the opening credits felt really discordant. Like it's this upbeat, cheery kind of military style march almost. And I was like,
it was a little jolting, you know what I mean? Like kind of like a shell shock. Cause like you said, you're in this tense movie, there's sweat, there's guns pulled, and then it just like drops you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, okay. Like, oh, okay. We're happy now, but wait, what happened? Is he alive? Like,
and like it does, you know, it is sort of I mean, it is a comedy in some ways as well. And the director of this, John Badham, did do a couple years later, Short Circuit. That was another one of his movies.
I saw that, and I'm like, I love that movie too.
So that's where I kind of get that same tone, that same feeling of like, Short Circuit is like that. It's got moments of seriousness, but it's very lighthearted as well, and the music kind of fit there. And I don't know, I'm going to look.
Right.
Because the music in this was Arthur B. Rubinstein. I don't know if he did Short Circuit or not, but he did work with John Badham a number of times because he also worked on Stakeout and Nick of Time, which were both his movies. So it's quite possible. But yeah,
and he directed Saturday Night Fever too, right?
Yes. Yep, that was his. So that was one of those where that music started playing. I'm like, this doesn't feel like the same movie I was just watching, but okay, sure, we'll just go with it.
Yeah.
He did not do it. Wait. No, I don't see him as doing the music for Short Circuit, so. But that's okay.
But was it same I can see the same pace like with the same director though that it's upbeat, tense, upbeat.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it has his look and kind of fingerprints on it. So we mentioned the trope of like the smart high school kid that's an underachiever that gets himself in trouble. This movie has another one of my favorite tropes, which is I love the trope of a good old boy high-ranking military officer, a general or an admiral or somebody like that who's he's that level, but he's sitting there chewing tobacco and he's got General Tex is what I like to call that trope, where it's like they're Southern and they've always got some sort of Southernism that they're using and just the way they talk.
Oh yeah, and later in one of the scenes he's sniffing a stogie.
Yeah.
He has a big old cigar.
Yeah, I don't know why I like that because it's such a dumb trope, but I just love it. I love anytime you got a general that's like that or an admiral or whomever.
Oh.
So.
We have the 80s trope of the aloof parents too.
Yeah.
Like those parents had no idea what was going on.
Not a clue. Also, how much money do those people make? Because my goodness, they had a big house, but that computer, all that equipment they had, like
that equipment, that's what I was thinking. It's like, dang.
Like none of that was cheap at all. We know they both work. We know that. So that was a thing, right? Because still, even still in the early 80s, that was not 100% common yet for both mom and dad to be working. So the fact that they both worked, and she's apparently, I think she's like real estate or something is what it sounded like on the phone.
Yeah, because she had Century 21 real estate. She had the real estate agent.
Oh yeah,
patch on.
And dad is just typical 80s father. He just seems like he just no clue what's going on. But yeah, they didn't have a single clue what was going on with their son at all. And then on top of that, we never see them again. Like when from the time he gets picked up by the FBI, that's it. We don't see the parents again. We hear them mentioned twice, and that's it.
Yeah, McKittrick says we called them and let them know everything's fine, as long as you cooperate. But I'm like, what are they thinking, though?
No doubt. No doubt, because
and they also don't know he doesn't go to school for a week,
right?
Because Ali Sheedy comes find him like, oh, you haven't been to school all week. Didn't they call?
Yeah, you would think the school would, because this is still back in the day when they mailed your report card to your house so your parents could sign it.
And they had to sign it. Yep.
Yeah. I remember that. So that was the kind of it's crazy. But not only that, so obviously there's a lot of hand wavy stuff in this movie, right? There's a lot of movie stuff. But I think the most unbelievable, the biggest leap of faith you have to make is that the FBI would effectively abduct a minor and then drive them across state lines, because they picked him up in Seattle and they took him to Colorado. They took him multiple states away because that's where NORAD is.
Right.
And I was like,
I didn't realize that until they said that. He said he's in Colorado. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
Okay. They went pretty far.
That was the point
but
where
I
I'm
also
like,
didn't realize
all right, I guess I can let that go, but it's just crazy.
That was one thing I didn't like. It took me a while to figure out. I didn't know where they were. It took a second watching, like when I was, because I let it play in the background, to rewatch it and maybe catch some things and make some more notes.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize in the beginning they were in Seattle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, they do that establishing shot, and they do have the Space Needle there, and that's what gave that away for me. Because at first I thought he was in California, and then I was like, no, wait a minute.
I thought he was in Chicago because that's where the reservations were from. Was from Chicago O'Hare to Paris.
Right. Yeah, they never say it outright. So, yeah, they just have that establishing shot. But you're right. If you're not paying attention, or you look away for a second, you don't see that shot, it would be really confusing because he's calling places in California. They're talking about Chicago. Now he's in Colorado. He's got to go to Oregon.
Yeah.
They shot it all in California.
So how many games? I wasn't able to. I saw Mrs. Pac-Man, but how many of the games did you know in the arcade?
Oh, man. So there was the Miss Pac-Man, obviously Galaxian. I know that one, what he was playing.
Is that what he was playing?
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, according to trivia, again, grain of salt, they sent him a cabinet to practice on, Matthew Broderick, before the movie.
Oh,
so he got to,
cool.
he was playing it for a little while before the movie, so it could be convincing that he was good. And I kind of like that the way they shot that, where you're watching the game, but you're seeing his reflection. Because obviously at that point, there's no way to comp that in. There's no digital composition. Everything has to be done in camera. So, he has to actually be standing in front of that cabinet. So I liked the look of that, but which is why I kind of believe that they may have secured a cabinet and kind of sent it to him and be like, here, practice with this so you look the part. Because there's other stuff they did to kind of fake some of the computer stuff. Like I did read where the computer in his house was programmed so, and we never see them actually typing, but it was programmed to just display regardless of the keys that were pressed. So it was like a programmed thing going on there, which makes sense. But that was all real equipment. That was all real computer equipment of the time. The only thing that wasn't functional was the acoustic coupler, the thing he would put the handset down in.
Oh, yeah.
Which, that was a real device. Those existed, but that particular one was just there visually to show you what was going on. He actually had like a straight modem on top of his computer. But I loved all of that. I love the old tech. He's got the big 8-inch floppy disks that he's got to put in, and he had the speaker that could play the computerized voice, the modem, the big, green monitor. All that was just awesome. Huge. I love the old real fed dot matrix printers with the two-tone paper. That was, I love seeing that.
That sounds so great. I remember always fighting with the sides to get because if that thing got off, it was a mess.
Oh yeah. Oh, it was horrible. Everything was terrible at that point. I loved that. I love all that old like retro tech like that. So it's just cool seeing it in a movie and seeing it used in a movie in a proper way, right? He's like, no, flip on the printer. I want to get a printout of what I'm seeing here. And like all that kind of stuff. I just loved all of that. But I really love the acoustic coupler.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I enjoyed it too.
So
I also liked it in the 80s montage, like he's using I was like, oh, the library index cards and microfiche and
yes.
It's like I remember those.
I do too. And
so
that
was fun
was
going down that
trip. Like he's got to go through the card catalog to find the name, to ask the librarian to get him books by this, these books, and just all that. That was so that took me back to, I can remember doing all that kind of stuff. So that was really cool. And it also is a quick way to show that, because we established that David is intelligent and he's resourceful. He's just not a good student. Right, in school, but outside of that, when he wants to be, he can be a good student. And so I liked that. And I even liked, little things like him knowing where they wrote down the password for the computer. Because back then, Again, because at the time the thought was never worried about people that weren't authorized to use computers using them, the security wouldn't be the same. So it's real easy for that. On top of that, I mean, I know people still today that write their passwords down because they're going to forget them. So it was one of those like, okay, that made total sense. And I loved all of that. In some ways, I think he gets himself sent to the principal's office just so he can check the password every couple of weeks.
I had the same idea because he knew where to look, and that's what he tells him, because they change it every couple of weeks. So I'm like, oh, so that's why you get yourself sent to the office. Okay.
Yep. By the way, his teacher, in that scene where he has the great line of your wife when the teacher's asking. That actor, that's another good character actor. He was it's Alan Blumenfeld, who I recognize. I've seen him in a bunch of stuff. He was in like Heroes series. He was in a bunch of things. There was a lot of those, right? There was a lot of faces in this that I saw, and I'm like, hey, I've seen you before.
Ton. Yeah. Where do I know you from?
Yeah.
Why do I know you? Why do I know your voice?
Because you had like
I did that a lot.
the two guys that go to NORAD to talk to Dabney Coleman. One of them was in Under Siege as like a wormy U.S. Senator guy or something like that. And you had Barry Corbin, who's the general, is another one of those guys. I've seen him in a bunch of stuff. He reminds me, he's from Texas. And if you look at his IMDb and you look at a lot of the stuff he's done in the last like 10, 15 years, it's all playing just old Texas guys and like Westerns and movies where he's on a ranch or something. But he's like, he reminds me of Noble Willingham is another actor that's like him, where he's a Texan and he's always playing that same type of character, that kind of no-nonsense Texas guy. So he's great. He was only 43 in this movie. Barry Corbin was. Wow. Which if you go by his, one of the trivia things cracked me up was somebody went through and listed what all of his medals were on his uniform in the trivia.
Oh, okay, cool.
And they said that based on those medals, he would have had a service record of about 43 years or 42 years of service. And Barry Corbin was 43 when they made the movie. So,
right. Entire lifetime.
Yeah. A voice I recognize.
Definitely well decorated.
Yes, he was. His aide, by the way, the guy that just followed him around and would always like hand him the phone and stuff. He was played by Michael Ensign. Do you recognize him?
I did, but I couldn't figure out where. I'm like, I know this man's face.
So the next year, the year after this movie came out, he was in Ghostbusters. He was...
Oh!
Yeah, he's the concierge at the hotel they go to when they wreck everything, and he's like, it's ridiculous, I won't pay it. I know, like, I see him and stuff, and it's just like, that's that dude from Ghostbusters. Like, I just can't, it's so burned in my brain who he is. But yeah, this was like the year before that. I mentioned John Spencer and Michael Madsen. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Dabney, how do you say his last name?
Coleman.
9 to 5.
Yep.
Always. He will always be in 9 to 5. He's also in You Got Mail, and I like him a lot, but for me, the iconic role he plays is 9 to 5.
That is one. He tended to play villains a lot, especially in that era. For some reason, there was something about him where he would play villains, but not always like, sometimes like 9 to 5, he's definitely a villain. In this, he's an antagonist, but he's kind of just, he's not like a terrible, terrible person. He's just got a lot of ego, and he just doesn't know what's going on. I remember him all the time from, did you ever see the Dragnet movie with Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks? Came out,
but it's been a while.
Okay, it came out in like 87. He played, Dabney Coleman is in that as a like Hugh Hefner type character. He's the owner of the magazine called Bait. And he, for whatever reason, in that movie, he has this weird lisp that they just gave him for that movie. And so all the time, I will quote. There's a moment in that movie where they say something to him, and his response, his comeback is just, "Well, you say," and it's with that lisp. He's saying "you say," but I hear it. I just always hear that in that lisp for him. So even when I see him in something like this, I'm like, oh, that's right. He doesn't naturally have that. It's not his natural speaking to have that lisp.
That's right. I'll have to rewatch that one.
Oh, it's so dumb, but it's so much fun. Okay, here's a voice. Did you recognize the voice of the... So when David and Jennifer go to like the college or whatever, or not the college necessarily, but wherever all the computer people are, and he goes to talk to the guys with his printout, and there's Jim and Melvin, which, by the way,
yes,
in the credits it's Malvin, and I thought it was Melvin. I don't know if I've ever seen... Melvin too. Yeah, but in the credits they have it listed as Malvin, which is awesome. That's a great name, and I want to use it. But did you recognize his voice?
Yeah, from Grease.
Yeah, Eddie Deason. Yep, he was Eugene, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I recognized him. It took me an IMDb, but I was like, I know you. Why do I know you? It was definitely like, okay, I got to research that. I know you're. But the other guy, I was also like, why do I know your face? And he is Mr. Tipton in My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah.
Which I've seen a lot of. He's the one of the eyewitnesses that made grits.
Yes. And he's right up there with sort of Alan Blumenfeld and John Spencer and like these character actors that would just pop up in stuff the time. You would just see them everywhere. That was Maury Chaykin. Eddie Deason, by the way, is also the voice of Mandark on Dexter's Laboratory. Dexter's like arch
I saw
nemesis.
that, and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I also didn't realize that Matthew Broderick was the voice of adult Simba in The Lion King.
Oh yeah, yep. Well, because
I don't know why I never realized it was all about Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I didn't,
right.
I didn't realize who made adult Simba.
And if you think about it, you were in the demographic, you were in the age group that would have been all you cared about at that point is Jonathan Taylor. Like you don't care about Ferris Bueller. Ferris Bueller's too old.
No.
It's all JTT all the time. The only other like Ali Sheedy was amazing as always. She was great. This was like
she was adorable. She looked really pretty.
Both of them are her and Broderick were about 21 when they made this. So they're playing 17.
I saw that.
But they were a couple years older than that, but they look young. They have a youthful look. Like Matthew Broderick has always looked pretty young. He's just got that kind of face. And Ali Sheedy definitely throughout she was in Breakfast Club, 2 years later? I think it was 85. And she was still playing high school student. So, that happens.
They fit the parts. It definitely wasn't. You definitely weren't looking at going, yeah, you're so much older. I didn't realize they were 21 until I looked at the trivia. So
yeah, they weren't.
It didn't stand out.
Yeah, they weren't the obvious, 28-year-old playing a high school student. They weren't. It wasn't like Matthew Lillard in Scream, where he's 27 or 28 and he's playing an 18-year-old. Yeah, it was a lot of those. The only other one I wanted to mention outside of them was there's supposedly an uncredited William H. Macy as a NORAD officer. I didn't see him, but given when this came out and how young he would have been during it, it's quite possible I just glossed over it. But I looked for him.
I don't know. I went I sat for an hour going through skimming searching that room, pausing it. I couldn't find him to save my life. I don't know where he is.
Yeah, he's probably, if he's in it at all, he's just in the background somewhere. He's an extra officer.
The guy who played Paul Richter is Mr. Bundles in Annie.
That's right.
That's where I know him from.
Yes.
Irving Metzen.
Yes.
Metzman.
I liked him. I wanted more of that character in the movie. There was
did
something.
too.
There was just something great, like the scene where he comes running in, yelling that it's just a simulation after the first little thing. I loved that because I'm just like, that poor guy is just sprinting through there, and then the general's like, "Don't run in here, somebody will get hurt." Like, just the most ridiculous thing. Oh, there was one other one. It was one of the. Jason Bernard was he was one of the NORAD officers. He's the one that has the exchange with the guy where he says, "I hope you like vodka."
Yes. Yes. I love that scene. I was like, I'm glad they have a sense of humor.
Yeah. But Jason Bernard, I see him and I always remember him as the judge in Liar Liar.
Oh, okay. I didn't put that together.
It was his last role.
Aw.
He died. He actually passed away before the movie came out, Liar Liar. But he's just got like a look about it, and I think it's because I watched Liar Liar a lot, because I really enjoyed that movie. So it's like it's just stuck in there. So it's another one of those faces. You see him, and you're just like, "Hey, I know that guy." But it was a fun, like a really cool cast. Even the the dad and the mom. Like the dad is just, I think, and I could be wrong on this, but my guess is that the one dad character in Stranger Things was based off of this dad, because he's got that same look. Not Mike. Is it Mike? Yeah, Mike's dad. Because he's got that same look. He's got the dark hair, the glasses, he's got a pipe, and he's always just kind of like blissfully unaware of anything going on. He doesn't really know what's happening.
I can see that.
So I bet you there was a lot of inspiration from Mr. Lightman in this, which was great.
I liked it too when the Ali Sheedy and him were like, "Oh, 41's really old."
Yes. Yes. That like, felt...
I'm 42. It's not old.
But what I loved about it was that felt authentic, because...
It did, yeah.
18-year-olds, 17-year-olds would totally say that. 100%.
Yeah. I could tell too, they had chemistry. They felt comfortable together, and I kind of felt like they had maybe be friends before. Like yeah, they were traversing that teenage awkward from like maybe friends into romantic friends,
Yeah.
But she knew the dog. She was calling him baby. So like it seemed like they all knew each other kind of beforehand.
It was I'm like, I think the way I read it was they knew each other. They went to school together, but the first time she goes to his house is when she gives him a ride home on her moped.
Oh, okay.
Which I totally want.
They seem to be comfortable though, like, because he's like, "Oh, just get a ride,"
Yeah, yeah. They definitely got along well, and you're right. I think they were, friends, but maybe just not like super close friends. But now he's got an opportunity to impress her a little bit with his computer and his ability to change their grades. So he does that. I like that.
That was cute.
That was. Let's see. I had this moment watching it where when he walks out of the 7-Eleven, which apparently is still an operating 7-Eleven in California.
Oh, wow.
But he was walking out of there with the big gulp, and he's drinking it. And I'm like, something just feels off about this. And then I realized it's because he has no ice in the cup, he has no lid, and he has no straw. He just poured it into a big cup and is carrying it, drinking. And I'm like, I've never, ever done that. I have never had like a fountain drink from a convenience store without a lid and a straw. And so it just looked so strange to me. And yet, that's obviously not the weirdest thing in that scene, because that's when he gets grabbed by the FBI in a windowless black van.
Right.
And then driven off 3 states away. It's just like, it's mind-boggling.
Well, I love that where like he's like, I made a note like, yeah, everything will be fine. Sure, we're just not gonna talk about. And she wants to tell the whole, like, school gossip.
Yes. Oh
like,
my.
Who can I tell? So like, he's like, no.
He's legitimately concerned, and she's like, "This is the coolest thing ever. Can I tell my friend?" No, you cannot. Please don't. Yeah,
that was cute. I did like that. That's how we found out really what was going on was the news.
Mm-hmm.
You know what
Oh
I mean?
yeah.
Like that scene was kind of neat. Like, oh, that's how he puts two and two together of I wasn't playing a game.
Because it's way
not
too
the game type of game I thought of.
Yeah, way too much of a coincidence to have that all happen right after he's playing that what he thinks is just a game. And it is to the Whopper, but it's not at the same time. So yeah, that was a pretty good one. So I also love when Dabney Coleman is getting ready to head into the meeting about like what's gone on. And there's they've got David, they've got him in the infirmary, right? And there's the tour group going through NORAD that day, which that idea is crazy to me. But sure, whatever. But then he's walking along with his assistant, who, by the way, his assistant in this, Pat Healy is the character's name. Her hair kept changing, right? I'm not crazy.
I was wondering, something was off with her, but I couldn't figure out what it was. So yeah, I think so.
Like her
because
hair
I kept
was
looking at her like,
yeah, like her hair was long, but then it was shorter, and then it was longer again. I'm almost positive of that. But the moment where he's getting ready to go into that meeting and she's like helping straighten his tie, and then he just takes his gum and hands it to her, and she pops it in her mouth and starts chewing it. I was like, oh, okay.
I did the same thing.
It was
what cursed God out the most. There you go.
Exactly. That was the exact note I wrote, actually. Because I was like, what the hell? But then I got distracted because as soon as that happened, he goes into the meeting, and who's in there but Principal Skinner, or Strickland, rather.
Yes.
James Tolkien, who, you know, if you're casting a cop or an FBI agent in the 1980s, you cast James Tolkien.
Yep.
I don't know of another person as physically intimidating as that man to be 5'5", because he is a tiny little dude, but you are always, he's got the voice and you're just always intimidated by him, whether because he was intimidating in Top Gun. He's intimidating as Strickland. He's intimidating in this. He was in Masters of the Universe, the He-Man movie, as a cop.
Ooh, okay.
I just saw him recently. I've been rewatching episodes of The Pretender as I'm on my treadmill every day.
Okay.
And he showed up in an episode of that as an FBI agent. Like, sometimes you get typecast, and he's made a career off of being a cop or an authority figure of some kind. It's pretty great.
Right.
So that was... Yeah,
he has an attitude, like, he stands tall even though he's only 5'5", you know? He's got the attitude to back up his stature.
Yes. Yes, he does. So yeah, they take him across state lines, and this was another thing. So it's such a good time capsule, right, of the 80s, because you've got little things like, him calling Ali Sheedy from a payphone. Number one, payphones, kids, those were a thing. It was a booth. You had to actually put money in to make a phone call, which I like how he got around
and
that.
It had a phone book.
Yes.
It had a phone book with it.
So he calls her long distance and gets her to pay for a plane ticket in his name in a different state. I was like, the 80s.
That's kind of where my brain broke, because I'm like, okay, it's not like she doesn't have a computer. Does she have a credit card? How did she pay for that?
I mean, that's a good question, right? Obviously, she's got some pretty rich parents too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from the 80s. I'm not calling my best friend and saying, "Hey, can you pay for a plane ticket?" without her having to go to her parent and be like, "Whoa, what's going on? I'm not just dropping an expensive amount of money for a plane ticket out of nowhere."
Well, and then on top of that, she bought one for herself because she shows up, because that's in Oregon is where he
Right.
was going. So she ends up
Uh-huh.
arriving in Oregon miraculously at the same time he did, even though she's coming from Seattle. But whatever. At this point, like,
She drove. She said it was a 3-hour drive.
oh, she drove. Okay. All right. That makes more sense. I think I missed
Mm-hmm.
that somehow. But still, like, because you could absolutely do that back then. You could just call the airline and be like, hey, I'm going to book a ticket. It's for this person from this airport. And they would just do it. There wasn't nearly the...
See, I didn't fly. I wasn't sure how that worked. That's why my brain broke. Like, how would that work? It's not like I can just go online and make a reservation anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
No, you would call them up. You would call the reservation desk and reserve it and say, all right, we're going to pay for it and all that. You could totally do that.
oh, okay.
But that was like, it's that time capsule of the early 80s where, like, security wise, like, not even the logistics of just doing an online reservation or anything like that, but the security. Like, nowadays, if I called an airline and said, hey, I want to book a flight for Kitlondon, she's going to fly from New York to Atlanta, and I'm in Michigan, like, they're just going to laugh at me and be like, no, you can't do that. Like,
Right.
we need identifying information about this person. It's like some random dude's
Right.
just going to show up at the airport and take this ticket and fly somewhere. Sure, why not?
I-
and
I
he's
did
a minor.
Think that.
By the
I was
way.
like, good thing. Yeah, good thing he didn't need his driver's license
Yes.
or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
They're just going to take him at his
like,
word.
oh, the days before ID. Yeah.
But I mean, there's other things like that, like when they run onto the ferry to go to the island, and they just sprint
Yep.
onto the literal ferry leaving the dock. I love that.
They
Like,
looked like it was normal. They were like, oh, hold the door. Yeah, these kids can jump on here. It's fine.
Yeah.
Don't slow the boat down or nothing. It's
Which-
fine.
you know, I can somewhat see, but also, like, that's the type of thing that I'm pretty sure only existed in the movies, is like that. But we think about it now, and it's like, no, that makes sense, but probably didn't. However, it's a fun scene.
I was surprised the FBI didn't know where he was going because of that. That's what I was also worried about. It was like, he's going to put a ticket in his name. They already know he reserved a flight just messing around.
Yeah.
Now he's really on a flight. How did they not track him there?
Yeah. The FBI wasn't particularly good at their job in this.
No.
The military seemed to be passably okay, but the FBI were just kind of like, what's going on? Which is fine. Without that, we don't have a movie, right? He's got to get there. He's got to get out to see Falcon.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah.
So it's fine. But I love that then, like, he gets out and he meets Dr. Falcon, and who's flying a pterodactyl around his island. I love that.
Yeah. That was my note. I was like, is that a pterodactyl? Like, what's going on?
So this is where I almost want a different movie, because his character, Falcon's character, is really interesting, fascinating, because of, like, his whole story we only get parts of, but the fact that he was a part of creating this whole system and then losing his wife and child in a car accident, and he basically went totally nihilistic. He's completely, like, he just gave up on everything. It's fascinating, and it's kind of would have made for a really interesting story.
Yeah. He also seemed at odds with the McKintrick.
A little bit, yeah.
Because McKintrick, when David first meets him, he goes, oh, yeah, I know you guys wrote an article about poker and thermal, you know.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, he's a eccentric guy, but he didn't see the potential of his work. So I can also see them fighting because he didn't want Joshua to be in a war room.
Yeah.
Like, or used how McKintrick's using it. Like, he didn't want that. So I thought that was kind of part of the reason why he wanted out too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
Maybe.
Yeah, because, I mean, he basically lost his drive and his sort of will when his family was gone, and that made him very nihilistic. And then on top of that, they're dealing with global thermonuclear war, and he's got this nihilistic look of like, well, but no one wins. And McKittrick, who's his assistant, is like, it's very ambitious, and it's just Falcon lost that ambition. It would have made for a really interesting story to tell, kind of learning that whole thing and how that happened. Could have made for a fun either sequel or prequel to this movie, or something else set in that world, or even a novelization, like a book about those characters. By the way, before I forget, there is a sequel to this movie.
Is there?
Yes. It's called Wargames: The Dead Code. It came out in 2008, I believe. I watched the trailer for it, and it looks awful. It looks absolutely terrible. Like, it looks
That's
like...
why we haven't heard of it.
Yeah, it looks like every direct-to-video cheap action thriller that you could think of. And one of the things that made this movie work is that it isn't that. It's not a standard action thriller. It's got moments of levity in it, but it's also like there's a heart to it. This felt like a cheap cash-in, and they just wanted to use the name because it has no characters involved. The computer in it is actually, at least by the way the trailer made it seem, actually the antagonist and like a real, trying to start a war. Versus, because that's the thing with this one was the Whopper, Joshua, and I like them giving it a name too. I like it being named after his son, and like that's the way that Falcon and that David think of it, is as Joshua, and everyone else looks at it as the Whopper, which the Whopper is a fun joke, kind of an in-joke, because NORAD had a computer called the BRGR, or the Burger.
Okay.
So.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of a Whopper candy.
Oh, yeah. But I like kind of giving it that name, and then the fact that the computer isn't necessarily evil. It's not like it's trying to start the war. It has the game. It's playing the game. And
well, I liked it when David asked him, "Is this just a game or real?" And Joshua comes back and says, "What's the difference?" Right,
because how would he know? He wouldn't really. He couldn't make that distinction because it's not a human. It doesn't have the emotions of a human. And that was kind of like you mentioned earlier, that was a big point in the beginning of the movie. And it's what makes me like the character of McKittrick, because McKittrick isn't just like, we're going to do this because it's the right way to do it and it's the best way to do it because it is. He's like, no, look, there's no, like, the guys in the tower with the keys are the break point of the chain because they're human and because they're going to have human responses. And he's like, we can take that response out of the equation by employing the computer. So logically, what he's doing makes sense, but it's not. The system isn't ready for that yet, as they learn.
No, but his assistant backs him up too. She says, "Yeah, that 6 minutes if it comes from a sub," and they're like, "The president can't give orders in 6 minutes."
Yeah. Yeah, like they're trying to, they want to have, they're coming at it from the right angle. They're just misguided, but their intentions are good, which is just to have the best and quickest response to what could possibly be happening, because that is a thing that we can tend to forget because the Cold War is over, but it was this idea that like at any moment things could completely change. And somebody could fire their missiles, and it would be, how are we going to react? So I thought that was kind of a neat backing for this story. And then on top of that, you get Falcon, who's like, yeah, but what's it matter? Like, if we start the war or if we retaliate, it doesn't matter because we're not going to win. And his whole thing of like, I've set us up, 3 miles from a point where the missiles would drop.
Primary target.
Yeah. So it's like it would just it would be over with. And the people that would suffer are the ones that survive. And it's just like, woof, wow, it got heavy. Like the movie gets heavy there for a bit. And if you're not prepared for that, it kind of blindsides you just a little bit of like, oof.
I do like Matthew Broderick. David gets in his face where he's like, "Okay, BS. I'm done with the sob story." Like,
yeah,
no,
and
this isn't going down like this.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? Falcon is he's lost his family. He's middle aged, and he's seen and he's thought about this stuff for so long. And then you've got Broderick and Sheedy, who are they're 17. They have their whole lives ahead of them. They don't want it to just end. Whereas Dr. Falcon is like embracing the end, basically. He's like, I'm not going to do it myself, but I'm not going to stop it from happening. So
yeah, and David straight tells him the truth, which I love the line. He goes, "You're dead already. That's why you don't care if you die. You're already dead." I was like,
yeah, and that's the nudge he needed.
Yep, and also Falcon, hello, Lady Hawk.
Yeah. Yep.
They will be together again in 2 years. He's in Jumping Jack Flash, and he but I really know him from Sabrina. He plays her dad in the remake. With Harrison Ford.
That's right. And
that's where I know him from.
And John Wood has an amazing voice. I mean, he just sounds awesome. So yeah, I really, really love that. But yeah, that was a great scene. I almost wish we had been able to spend more time with his character and kind of hit that story and make that a little, because it would have given more emotion to the movie. But at the same time, it changes the movie. And it changes kind of what they were going for with this, which is it is a thriller in the sense that like war could happen at any point, but it's more lighthearted than that. Right. So, the movie gets heavy, but it doesn't go so heavy that you're like, you can't rewatch. Like, this is very rewatchable as a movie. And I think
it's definitely going in my comfort food movies. I love it. But David needed Falcon though to lend credibility to himself.
Oh, absolutely.
Because no one was going to listen to him.
Right.
The only reason why the general listens and doesn't shoot the launch the missiles is because of Steven.
Yeah.
And he's respected. And if he says this is a farce, then I'm going to listen.
Yep, and Falcon needed David to kick him and get him to realize that, no, I can stop this, and also it's worth doing. It's worth stopping what's going on here. Because it's not so much that he's doing it for himself. At that point, Dr. Falcon is doing this for David and Jennifer. They're giving him back a little bit of that hope and taking, helping him to step back from the ledge in a way. So I liked that. Let's see. I also loved when they take the helicopter from the island to from Oregon to Colorado, and then they're driving up the mountain in a Jeep. And that Jeep blows through the gate and then topples over because it gets caught on the gate. That wasn't planned. That was apparently that was a legit accident mistake in the stunt, the director liked it, so he kept it in and then added in the shots of like them getting out of the Jeep as it's toppled over, and I thought that was really cool. I thought that because that added to the severity of the time crunch and sort of what was like they couldn't even stop to like worry about the fact that the Jeep got knocked over. They're just like blowing through the gate and then sprinting for that door.
Well, they're asking each other if you're okay as they're running.
Yeah. Yes.
They do say, "Are you okay?" Okay. They don't stop. But here's my question: why couldn't you have flown the helicopter into there?
Probably didn't have they probably didn't have the helicopter for long enough on the film set. But also, I don't know if there was a helipad. Because we saw them fly a helicopter in the beginning. Yeah.
They flew the helicopter in the beginning. So I'm like, why didn't you just fly the helicopter into there? And I know it wouldn't have been as dramatic with the Jeep, but
I'm gonna go with
you
they
need
had
to get
helicopter
somewhere.
budget for 2 days, and they used their 2 days of budget.
Okay.
And they had no more. Well, we can't afford the helicopter anymore. All right, have them drive up in a Jeep.
Right, but that was my like. Why wouldn't you just
Yeah.
fly the helicopter in there?
They'd have gotten there quicker.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they have to sprint through that tunnel, which that tunnel is a famous one. It's a tunnel in California, but that tunnel set that they used in this was in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It was used.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, I've seen this tunnel before.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was the tunnel to Toontown, and it was also at the end of Back to the Future 2. They used that same tunnel. And I'm sure it's been in a bunch of other movies, but those were the two that were listed. And I definitely, when I was watching it, I'm like, yeah, I've seen this tunnel before.
Yeah, I felt the same way, but I didn't know why. I'm like, this feels familiar. But that was also the slowest closing door.
It really
ever.
was. It really, really was. And you've got the character of Pat Healy standing outside, like telling him not to close the door, and the door's just slowly closing anyway. The beginning of the movie when they had
like,
that,
no one's listening to her.
yeah, the beginning of the movie when they were doing that, all I could think of was there's a guy that walks out the door right before it closes, and I'm like, I see that in movies all the time. I don't know that I would be able to do that. I would just get caught and like stuck inside. Like, well, I guess I'm not leaving today because I'm inside the door, and it was like I didn't have enough time to get out because I would be.
And he wasn't even paying attention either. I thought the same thing. Like, he just must be comfortable with it because he's just reading his report and kept walking. Like, oh, okay.
Never even
Didn't
looked
even
up
notice
or
what was
broke stride.
in.
Yeah.
Nope. Mm-mm.
Yeah, that really did crack me up. What was the other one? And I also kind of like how you mentioned the line earlier where McKittrick says that about Falcon. Well, he's a brilliant guy, but he's a little flaky. He didn't understand the potential of his work or whatever. It's kind of it's kind of a little bit of a like, oh, he's not actually dead because he says he's a brilliant man, but a little flaky instead of he was.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Because obviously McKittrick knows that he's still alive, but to the general public.
Oh, yeah.
he's dead.
Nobody was surprised to see him.
Yeah.
At all.
The general's like,
you're alive? Yeah. So they obviously knew because it was classified. You know what I mean? But like, I don't know what you think you're going to do.
Right. Which again, could have been a bigger plot point, but it changes the movie. And really we want to focus on like David being the one to stop things, figuring out that if we can get the computer to play tic-tac-toe and learn that there are unwinnable situations, so the only move is to not play. That's it's sort of the message they were trying to drive home. And it worked. It worked. I did
notice.
Oh, go ahead.
In my rewatch that the video they're watching of Falcon, like back in the day with Joshua, Joshua is playing tic-tac-toe on a big machine. I was like, oh, okay.
And
little nuggets we didn't know were coming.
Yeah. I also love the look of the NORAD command center. It's such a cool.
Yes.
It gave me very I love the movie Dr. Strangelove, and it felt like that war room, but just turned up to 11, like just bigger and more elaborate. And I love that whole thing. And apparently that was like $1 million set to build. It was this huge set.
I can't believe it.
And they, the screens, those big monitors weren't monitors. They were like rear projection. So they had projectors built behind them to shoot that stuff up on the wall because there weren't monitors that size. They didn't have displays like that at that time. So they had to kind of create that. Right.
Where to us, it feels natural. Like, yeah, they'd have those screens.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like going into one of my comfort movies is The Martian. Like when they find out he's alive, she's in the Houston Command Center or watching Apollo 13.
Yep.
Like it gave me those kind of vibes. Even in Spaceballs,
Yeah.
that room with like
With all the screens
the
and
main
stuff.
control center and stuff like. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it felt very cozy. Like like, oh, I've seen this before. This is cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool room.
And I guess for some of the imagery, they had to render it to then project it. They used computers to render things, but they had to render everything one color at a time, and then composite that all together onto the film frames, and then use that to do rear projection onto those screens. So,
neat.
Stuff that would be done in like no time now. That was what they
right.
So that's you have to work with the technology you've got, and the technology they had was that back then. I mean, they had workstations like that were computers that they're very limited in what they're capable of. So I thought that was cool, and I liked that the movie got a couple of Academy Award nominations for the script and for the cinematography, because I think it looks really good.
Oh, should have. Yeah, it does.
Now
everything felt kind of practical too. That's what I liked. I liked everything, like you said, maybe not projecting, but it felt real. Like they really built those sets. So when you said, it's $1 million, I was like, yeah, that I can feel it, because, it's one thing Ridley Scott says, everything might not work, but they're sitting there. They're looking at these things and buttons and all that. So that's what I liked a lot. The one thing about the Whopper, like, how like it lights up all the way around, right?
Yeah.
It's got the red and yellow lights. So the one lady's around doing her little checks. I'm like, what are you checking for, to make sure the lights are flashing? Like,
sure,
you have no idea.
Like that's
what's on a checklist. Like,
yeah,
there's 5 red dots. Like, you don't really know what you're looking for.
No, but the Whopper is one of those great things where it's definitely a function or a form over function thing. It's built to look cool. It's not really.
Oh, it did.
There's no function to it, but they're like, let's make something, because it was all made out of wood. It wasn't metal. They just painted it to look metal. But just put a bunch of lights on it and have the lights flash and do stuff just because it looks interesting. And it, instead of it just being a box with like a small display, adding that adds just so much dimensionality to it. And I like that.
But it's not like a switch though, where you can see like, yes, this switch is on, like it's supposed to be, is this light out? That's not supposed to be. You know what I mean? That's what I mean. Like there was no identifying things that you'd be checking off a list besides that it's blinking red and yellow.
Right. Are the lights blinking? Oh, look at that. They still are.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
I don't know that they're blinking.
Exactly. She has no clue.
But see, that like what I like about this era of film and through the 80s into the early 90s was everything, for the most part, had to be done practically. And if it wasn't practical, you had optical effects. Things like the way Tron worked, which was, I think, the year before this, where they shot everything in black and white and then added color to that. And the way they would do stuff with even some of the early CG stuff that they would do. Like the stained glass guy in Young Sherlock Holmes, which is, I think, the first fully rendered CG thing. But like a lot of that stuff, because so much had to be done practically, it has this tactile nature to it. And what happened was, I think, as computers became more ubiquitous and we could do more computer generated images, we swung too far in that direction. Because what I'm seeing these days is a lot of times it's a lot of practical stuff that is then enhanced and extended with computers. And that's where it can be really powerful, because you have that tactile nature of what Ridley Scott says with the, like, yeah, it might not work, but it's sitting there. They're sitting in front of it. They're in that chair. They can see it. And then you augment that and you add to it and you give it more. Because when I talked about Prometheus a few weeks ago, that was one of the things, was he had them build a bunch of those sets and then just add stuff to it, or add a background, but it's still a big old set they're wandering around in, a hangar. And that, so if you can't build everything, build as much as you can and then add to it, which can be more cost effective, can take less time, and you can get something that looks a little bit better. But then when you go back and you look at some of these older movies where they had to build everything and have it on the set, and if they couldn't do that, it was like a matte painting, which you could tell was a matte painting. So, yeah, I love that. I love the tactile nature of all that stuff.
This had a real feel to it. Like, I never questioned anything. Like, you were talking about, like, they did CGI in the screens. I thought it was really there.
Yeah.
I didn't know. You know, like, it feels grounded for some reason. I don't know.
And I think a lot of that is because the technology is such that it's so low res, you almost have to have it be practical, because it's not this high fidelity thing. Like the computers were these big boxes, these big beige boxes with huge clacky computer, clacky keyboards and big floppy drives, and the screens were 14 inches and they only made the color green, and so you can only work with like that. So the limitations of that, I think, help to make it feel more real, because you pretty much have to have that sitting in front of you. So yeah.
It also
go ahead.
Another reason why I really liked the movie was it reminds me of the Columbo episode Mind Over Mayhem, where he's in the think tank.
Oh, right.
They have a war room, and they have an AI robot that's up there typing to do these different scenarios. That's what that's what the think tank was doing, was basically playing out World War III. It was basically that kind of same story, that same idea, is that they're trying to figure out, oh, if this happens, and this is our response, how does it play out? So I kind of already liked that idea. I mean, he uses the AI to so he can, as his alibi, he's running the war room.
Right.
And he's off killing the professor, the one guy, to save his son. But it was that same idea that they were trying out World War III. They were playing it out in a war room.
Yeah.
So it reminded me of that, and I liked that a lot.
And that was a big thing in the 70s and 80s, was, the worry of World War III and the Cold War. So yeah. I did capture some audio, because there was a few things to listen to in this, and I could not help myself on some of them. This first one I loved. This is Matthew Broderick in school with his teacher, because, I mean, come on. Like, the teacher, number one, set this up way too easily. Number two, this is David going for the low-hanging fruit of the joke, but still pretty good. Here's that.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us who first suggested the idea of reproduction without sex.
Your wife?
Yeah. I mean, that's where the headcanon of, like, no, he gets himself sent to the principal's office on purpose makes much more sense, because I don't care what kind of attitude problem you had. You're not saying that to your teacher unless it's on purpose. So
yeah, I thought he deserved it, because I mean the teacher back in the public humiliation, here you got an F.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, it went both ways. I mean, it was the 80s.
I always hated that.
Okay, here's Eddie Deezer. And I needed this for my soundboard. So I have this now, which is,
Why are you guys dumb? You guys are so dumb.
I figured this out all by myself.
Yes, great. And I love the line right before that, where the guy's like, where Jim tells him, you know how I'm supposed to tell you when you're being rude?
Yep.
This is one of those times.
Yep.
Okay, here's Ali Sheedy in school, which, again, that's such a silly answer to this question, but the teacher set himself up for this kind of stuff.
Why do nitrogen nodules cling to the roots of plants?
Love?
Yes, love. That's what it is. That's what it is, Jennifer. It's love.
Yeah. I'm thinking he's not a very effective teacher.
No, it doesn't sound
I don't
like
think those other students knew what was going on either.
No. By the way, the your wife punchline, according to the director, half the crew didn't know that was coming, so the laughter in that scene is the crew laughing, and he just kept it in.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Here's one. You mentioned this earlier, but
Better than a laugh track.
Oh, 100%. You mentioned this line earlier. We talked about it a little bit, but this is definitely two teenagers talking.
He wasn't very old.
Oh, he was pretty old. He was 41.
Oh, yeah? Oh, that's old.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, that's old. I just turned 42. Apparently I'm ancient.
Yep. Yes.
And then this one cracked me up more than I think it probably should have. When she meets up with him in Oregon and he's talking about how much trouble he's in, he's like, "You shouldn't have come here. I'm in trouble." And then she responds with,
David, is this because of what you did with my grade?
"Yes. Yes, Jennifer. It's because he changed your grade that the FBI has taken him states away. Not his grade,
Right, like
your grade."
You can see where her priorities are because she completely forgot about the whole nuclear, like NORAD thing on the
Right.
news, right?
Yeah.
No, this is about grade changing because those are the serious stakes.
Gotta love that. Also, and look, I'm going to give a pass to this because if you've only ever seen a word written out, you're not going to know how to pronounce it. But I got this because it was too funny. When they're playing the game and she asks him,
What's a trajectory heading?
a trajectory heading. I was like, all right. It's fair. You've probably never seen that word written out. So, there's that. This is the vodka one. I just love this exchange because
Oh, it was great.
at that point, I mean, you just kind of resign to your fate, right?
Sergeant, I hope you like vodka.
Yes, sir. I just hope they don't make me eat none of them damn fish eggs.
None of them damn fish eggs.
That guy's in a bunch of movies too. The guy that was talking.
Yeah, he is. I can't think of anything,
He's a
but
character.
he's definitely, I've seen him before.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so again, grain of salt on this because it was from the trivia, but I did capture this because it was interesting to me. According to what I read, this is the first time in a movie that this was mentioned.
You keep hitting a damn firewall.
A firewall as a computer thing, which I can see it if it is the first time that was mentioned in a movie. But I just like that because, again, using some terminology that's true, that's real, which is one of the things that, and I say this all the time, but it was one of the things that hackers did well, is there's a lot of times in that where they're using terms properly.
Right.
So-
I was just going to say, and they used it properly. It wasn't just, oh, this is a new term. We got to throw it in there. They actually used it appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Not
well
just
as well as they
inserted it in
could.
the middle somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The dad. First of all, one of my notes was that dude was putting a lot of butter on that bread because he sat there
Yep.
for minutes buttering that bread with just
He
like
did.
like a quarter of an inch of butter on that thing. And it was
I'm
all
like, I do that with. I've done that. You butter a piece of bread
Mhm.
to butter the corn.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a way too much butter.
But then I love because he's so excited. He gets the butter all over the corn and he's ready. And his wife sits down and he goes to take a bite and it's just.
This corn is raw.
I know, isn't it wonderful? It's so crisp.
Of course it's crisp. It's raw.
He was so disappointed. So disappointed.
I would have been too. I was like, wow, like he worked for that. Make it perfectly buttery. It looked so good. And yeah.
That feels like, I mean, you would see something like that today where like an influencer would tell somebody, oh, you should be eating your corn raw. You don't want to cook the nutrients out of it. And it just shows you that kind of stuff is, because she read that in a magazine somewhere. Right.
Mhm.
Not to cook that to keep all the nutrients in there. That stuff's been going on for
And the checkout line. Yep.
Yep. And then she tells him, you know, you can taste the vitamin A and vitamin D or whatever. And I just loved his response to it, which is,
Could we have pills and cook the corn?
please. That poor justice for his corn, because my goodness, that there are a few things I think more disappointing than an ear of sweet corn and you bite into it and it's still raw. That would definitely be a bummer for me. Okay, so the two techs, or the two launch control guys at the beginning of it, John Spencer and Michael Madsen. I got a couple of theirs just because number one was I played it for you before we started recording, but it's John Spencer is having the human response of like, this can't be real. We're actually going to launch nukes. And I just liked this exchange.
Screw the procedure. I want somebody on the goddamn phone before I kill 20 million people.
That's very reasonable.
I was with him.
Yes, I agree with you, sir. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yep, I did too.
Um,
Like, I'm going to do my job, but I still would like some confirmation, like, in someone on the phone.
Yeah. And then, but the funny thing is, like 30 seconds earlier, he says,
This grass made Thai stick tastes like oregano. Lay you out flat, man.
Yep.
Like 30 seconds earlier, he's just talking about weed, and now all of a sudden it's, oh, we're about to kill 20 million people. Great. Nothing to worry about there. So Dr. Falcon had a couple of quick lines that I loved. And again, was it John Wood? John Wood. Yes. Amazing voice. And there's three I have of him. First one is this.
But back at the war room, they believe you can win a nuclear war, but there can be acceptable losses.
Which, yeah, I know there's a lot of people that will do, you know, the good of the many versus the good of the one and whatnot. And he just was like, I can't do that. And it was the way he says that, the way that line is delivered of there can be acceptable losses. And he's like, he can't get behind that at all. But I also liked this.
I loved it when you nuked Las Vegas. Suitably biblical ending to the place, don't you think?
This is great. Because there's that nihilism again. Like, you see kind of both sides of it in there, which was fun. And then this was one, and this is apparently the greeting from like a British television show for kids. But I loved it when he tells the kids, okay, now kids, I have a movie to show you.
Yeah, I was hoping you got that. I was like, I'm going to tell you a bedtime story.
Yeah, but it was this part of it that I got.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. It was very good.
It's said with like, if you didn't know better, it sounds upbeat, but it definitely has some sarcasm all over that.
Oh,
like,
sure.
He's not about really to tell him a happy tale.
No, not at all.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not. He's trying to sound happy, but it's not. I don't know.
No. And then finally, I did get two more sounds. First one is the whopper at the end of the movie. And there's a little echo in this because it's inside the war room, but still, it's a good line.
Strange game. The only winning move is not to play.
Which, you know, it's the message to take from it. War, nuclear war especially. The only winning move is to not do it. By the way, that was supposedly John Wood, his voice, and then they just synthesized and did some stuff with it.
Oh, neat.
Which I thought was kind of cool. And finally, the most famous clip of audio from this movie is probably this.
Shall we play a game?
Because even if you hadn't seen this movie, you know that.
Yes,
and
I
you
did.
know, and you know it's associated with war games. And it was great. I loved that. So now I have that on my my soundboard forever.
Yay!
I will use it
Fabulous.
irresponsibly. Yeah, that's Wargames. Wargames is a really good, just kind of slice of 1980s, but also sort of a hacker movie before hacking was really a thing. Because I did mention that, you know, it wasn't illegal to hack into a computer back then. It wasn't illegal until the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. And part of that was based off of this movie. Then they added on to it with some other Computer Fraud and Abuse Act of like later in the 80s and so on, to kind of make that. But yeah, prior to that, and when this movie came out, it wasn't illegal to log into another computer like that, which I just find fascinating. So
yes.
But yeah, this movie is a lot of fun. Matthew Broderick is great. Ali Sheedy is great. I mean, everybody is. John Wood, Dabney Coleman, they're all good. Everybody kind of understood the assignment of this. It is suspenseful, but still lighthearted in parts, while getting a little heavy and philosophical in other parts.
Yeah, I did find it fascinating that at the end of the movie, Dabney Coleman, his character, hugged David. His own father didn't hug him. Like, his mother did, but it was very stilted, you know, not close to his parents. You know what I mean? Like, he's hugging these people he's only known for like 2 days or a day.
Yeah.
And, you know, he feels closer to them than... And I always wondered, too, what happens when he went home? Is he grounded? Like, did I just save the world and you're grounding me?
Because that's the thing, right? Like, his parents aren't going to find out about any of that because it's all classified, top secret. Right?
Oh, right.
So he's just going to get home, and his mom's going to be like, "Well, that's it. You're grounded for your next 3 lifetimes."
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I hope you like that bedroom because you're never leaving it. Yeah,
Sorry,
I mean,
the internet's coming at some point.
That's true. Yeah, he'll be fine. Yeah, that's that is the big question of the movie. Is like, what's up with his parents, and what do they find out, and when? Because basically nobody outside that room should know about what happened and how close they got to launching the nukes on Russia. And it's like, now you've got 2 17-year-old school kids who've got to keep that under wraps too. Or are they going to suddenly die in a car crash and move to, you know, Alaska or something and be isolated from the rest of humanity? Who knows? That would have been a much better thing to base a sequel on than whatever the hell Wargames The Dead Code is. I don't even want to watch that. But if you get a chance, find the trailer for that and watch it, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
I will,
it's
for
terrible. Sure. It looks so bad.
Did they remake this movie?
I
thought I saw something else as well, and I'm like,
not that I am aware of.
Different movie.
I mean, they've done, you know, this movie has been kind of parodied. It's been reimagined. There was a Wargames TV series in 2018. I wonder if that military brat or band of misfits hackers transformed from pranksters to leaders of an international movement. Kind of. It would be.
Maybe that's what I've seen.
Yeah, it would be fairly interesting to kind of see something like this in a more modern era, because you could add a lot more of machine learning and AI type arguments into the equation. Whereas here we had, I mean, it was an artificial intelligence that was behind the Whopper, and it could learn, but it was very rudimentary.
Right, and that's why also they didn't believe him. Like, a computer can't call you.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Now that would be the worry that I would have in a modern setting with it, is that they would overdo that, and they would give the AI too much intelligence, because of, you know, I mean, ever since Terminator and Skynet, every AI is evil and going to destroy the world.
Right.
Except for the AI that I talked about last week on Bicentennial Man, which was the hopeful AI. So it's kind of interesting to do this right after a movie like Bicentennial Man, to then watch and discuss Wargames, and there is an AI involved, but it's so very different.
Right.
And it's such a different type of movie too. So, no, this was fun. I'm really glad. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, did you notice there's a Tron machine in the arcade?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I was like, nice.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, I'm really glad you got to watch
Yeah.
this. This was a great choice.
Yeah. I just always think about it. See, I thought it asked him to play a game, and David had to tell him at the end, no, I don't want to play. I didn't realize it was the computer that came back and said the only way to win is not to play.
Yeah.
I thought that was Matthew Broderick telling him that.
Well, I like that because that's the thing that Dr. Falcon could never get it to understand or didn't teach it was the idea of futility. And so for Matthew Broderick to be like, oh, get it to play tic-tac-toe, it'll figure out that you can't win the game, so what's the point of playing? And let's go on to something else.
But that's how he taught them.
Yeah. Yep.
He taught them that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it clicks with him like, oh, we have to teach it the same way how you taught us about what that is.
So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
This was a lot of fun. And thank you for being on. It's been a while. I think the last time you were on was City of Angels.
Yes,
right?
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Now, I record this show every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, twitch.tv/TV's Travis. You can come hang out, watch it live when I record it. And then it comes out on Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube, all of that fun stuff. I have some fun stuff coming up next week. But before that, Kit, where can people find anything you're working on or anything that you're doing?
I stream Friday nights with Voltaire and Mission Deep, also known as Brian Dunaway, on Mission Deep's channel Friday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern Time.
Excellent.
Otherwise, I'm in the Discord with Mission Deep peeps. It's usually where you can find me.
And I think you're still playing Baldur's Gate 3 on Friday nights, right? Is that what you guys are
Yes.
doing? Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool. Very, very cool. Now, next week, I have another returning guest. Cyrenex is coming back. He has not seen Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I've never heard of it.
And I adored that movie. It came out in 2022, so it's fairly new. But it is phenomenal. It was one of the best movies I saw that year. Stars Michelle Yeoh, Ki-hye Kwan, and Jamie Lee Curtis is in it as well. It's a multiverse movie, which it's one of the better movies I've seen in the last couple of years. It's phenomenal. So I can't wait to watch it again and then to talk with him about it. It's going to get interesting. Let's put it that way. And it's going to be nice to have him back on the show, and we're talking about something other than John Wick for once.
Right.
So that'll be a lot of fun. That's what's coming up next week. As always, I'm here every week. I'm also on all the social medias as TV's Travis, doing Highlander stuff, doing Those Were the Days. You can go to tvstravis.com, find all the shows I'm working on, and also links to merchandise. I've got the Patreon there. You can support this show for as little as $1 an episode through Patreon, patreon.com/WYHS. So if you can do that, I appreciate it. If not, and you just listen to the shows, I appreciate that so much. It's why I do it. I love doing the shows, and I'm just going to keep doing them. I've got some fun stuff coming up this year, too. I've got live episodes happening that are going to be happening at places like Dragon Con and all sorts of fun stuff coming up. So definitely keep an eye out on all the socials and tvstravis.com for any of that. But Kit, thank you. Thank you so much for being here this week. This was a ton of fun.
Yes, thank you. Very excited to be back.
Excellent. And remember to enjoy your movies. And we're getting into 2024, so let's be excellent to each other. Okay? This has been Wait You Haven't Seen.
Damn it, I'd piss on a spark plug if I thought it'd do any good.